Welcome once again to Cinema Classics The Goldwyn Touch. I'm your host, Nick Solerno, with this week's film, a truly great film, Samuel Goldwyn's Wurthering Heights, directed by William Wyler in 1939, starring Merle Oberon, Laurence Olivier, David Niven, and Geraldine Fitzgerald. That this film was made at all with this cast is very surprising. Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur had written a script for Sylvia Sidney and Charles Boyer, but realized that Goldwyn would make it only with one of his own contract players. So they scared him by saying that Jack Warner's wanted to buy the property for Betty Davis. Goldwyn fell for it, bought the property for Merle Oberon. The next question was how to get Laurence Olivier, for they had made up their mind that they were indeed going to have Laurence Olivier. But he was in England, very much in love with Vivien Leigh, and reluctant to leave her. A troop of people went over to try to talk him into it, and ultimately they had to work on Vivien Leigh, trying to get her to accept the part of Isabella, telling her that she would never again receive that good a part in an American film. Of course, she would make Gone with the Wind very shortly thereafter, but Olivier agreed to make it, and the rest is history. For both Olivier and Merle Oberon, it becomes one of the most important films in their careers. Wurthering Heights, and after the film, an interview with Carl Reiner. Samuel Goldwyn's Wurthering Heights, directed by William Wyler, a film which received 8 Academy Award nominations and which earned one for the cinematography of Greg Toland. As I told you before the film, this week we have an interview with Carl Reiner. The interview was shot at the Ramada Beverly Hills, and we discussed with Carl Reiner particularly his work as a writer and a director of both big screen and small screen comedy. Talking to Sheldon Leonard yesterday, I told him that I would be interviewing you today. He said I should tell you that he had been maligning you everywhere, that you once brought him a script for what became the Dick Van Dyke Show, and he said that you didn't have enough knowledge to play the part.
Wow, it's close. No, it was, I had done it as a pilot in New York. I had written 13 episodes for something that I thought would be a good vehicle for myself. I did it, and it did sell. That was a year only Horses and Guns sold. And I put it to bed and let it rest.
Head of the Family? Or
it was called Head of the Family.
Head of the Family.
Yeah, and Sheldon and I had a mutual agent, and they kept bothering us to get, because there's 13 scripts, that's like gold for agencies. They say, well, 13 good scripts, why can't we do something with it? And I had no interest in failing again with this thing a second time. And Sheldon and I got together and said, Sheldon, let's do it. Sheldon said, I said, I'm not going to fail again. He says, okay, I mean, you be the producer and writer. I said, I'm not a producer, I'm an actor. So he said, you can be the producer. He says, we'll get Dick Van Dyke or Johnny Carson, somebody. And he made it sound very palatable. And I watched Sheldon, walked around, and I impersonated a producer and became a producer. That's an actor producing, that's all. It's the same thing.
You spend, of course, now much more time producing by far than...
Mainly directing and writing, very little acting.
Is that really
I consider this one of my prime performances in theater at this moment.
It's bound to be.
I've even got makeup on. Powder, right? Not real makeup.
Your new film, The Jerk, did you write that specifically for Steve Martin?
No, I didn't write it. It was written by Steve Martin and a fellow named Carl Gottlieb, who worked on Jaws and is quite a good writer. And they did a first draft, and Mike Elias came in and did a second draft and a third draft, and I came in and did a fourth draft, and there's a lot of hands in it, but it's mainly Steve's madness in the picture. It's him. Steve is a most creative man. As you know, his act is all him. He writes it, and he gets a little help from people. I mean, he does ask for help sometimes, once in a while, has a writer come in, but basically it's just as a sounding board. He's a very creative writer. And so it's his baby, and it's his kind of madness.
If you would give someone a plot synopsis of The Jerk in 25 words or less, it would seem like it could be either tragedy or comedy.
Oh yes, all good comedies should have a tragic look to it. I think if you base it in reality, there's no. By the way, this is not based on the reality. This picture, they use the word wild and crazy picture, which is something that he invented for himself, a wild and crazy guy. And of course, the studios love to catch on. Of course, it is wild and crazy. But the plot line, if you take any of the old Chaplin plot lines, they don't sound like comedies. A tramp finds an orphan in a garbage can, thrown away. the blind girl. He falls in love with a blind girl. You know, I mean, those are all tragedies if you tilt them one way.
Mm-hmm.
You can tilt Hamlet to be a comedy too. You know.
Some people play it
Yes.
that way. Let's play a little game, a game of comedic Rorschach.
Okay.
I mention a comedian.
Yes.
You give me as brief a description as you can.
Sure, this is fun for you. I did this once before, and I got in terrible trouble because a Rorschach test reflects on you. But when you're talking about another comedian, you don't say the right thing. You're hurting them. So go ahead. This is going to be the easiest Rorschach test you ever got.
Ruth Gordon.
Great. You're getting a great for everybody. A little older than most of them.
George Burns.
Older than Ruth. I love him. Sweet man. Jewish. Yes, that comes to my mind because he was very Jewish as a young man.
Mary Tyler Moore.
Pussycat.
Yeah.
I love her. I mean, I sexually want to attack her. Yes, I did, at least when we worked together. I never did, though.
Bob Hope.
One of my all-time favorites when I was a kid.
Woody Allen.
I wish I had his brain.
Marshall Brickman.
He wishes he had Woody's brain. No, Marshall Brickman is a very talented man. And I like him. We did the Carson show together, and he was terrific with me and for me.
Danny Kaye.
Yeah, we all patterned ourselves after Danny Kaye when we were kids. We all wanted to be Danny Kaye.
You were once quoted as saying that your experience on the show of shows with Sid Caesar was for you a writing college.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I had always noodled with writing. I never sat down and typed anything until after the Sid Caesar show. But I'd always written for myself when I was in the Army. I wrote routines for myself, borrowed varied themes that existed. And, you know, that's young comedians hear a joke when they're very young, tell the joke they've heard, and then embellish it, can create a new joke based on it sometimes. So by the time I got to the Sid Caesar show, I had been writing material for myself, but I sat in a room with extraordinarily talented, gifted, creative comedy writers, and the list of them are legend. I mean, starting with Mel Brooks, who was a young 20-year-old writer who got $35 a week in petty cash to work with Sid. Doc Simon, Neil Simon, Joe Stein, who wrote Fiddler on the Roof, Mel Tolkien, who wrote for years for All in the Family, and later, for Bob Hope, Tony Webster, 2 Broadway plays. I'm leaving out many of the writers. Lucille Callan has written 2 novels. You're looking down, and I'm trying to remember all the names so that when they watch, I
So
always
you can skip any of
No, I
them.
always leave out a couple names, and I get in a lot of trouble. Aaron Rubin, Larry Gelbart. I mean, they go on forever.
One of your early films, Where's Papa, is now a cult film.
Yes, cult. I'll call it. It's a cult film.
It's a cult film. It wasn't a likely candidate for popularity
No,
when
it
it
sure
came
was.
out.
It sure was.
Was there any trouble even getting it made? from
No,
hands?
as a matter of fact, United Artists went into it happily, and they thought it was so funny and so commercially viable that they decided to play it for the National Association of Exhibitors in Florida, where nobody plays their product. They always show a clip of their product, but UA said, let's go in and show them the whole picture. We know how funny. We had played it for audiences. They roar, they fall out of their seats. We played it for the exhibitors, and they walked out of their seats. I mean, they just left. They said, how dare you, can't use that kind of... It was really language. It was 1969, I believe, and at that point, language was not used that way in the film. There was no sex, no violence. Isn't that interesting? They were offended because words were used, but they'll accept sex, violence, explosion of cars, burning of human flesh, bullets going through eyes with blood flying,
That's
arms
okay.
being... That's all right. That's cute. You can let kids see that. But say those dirty words, the kids will fall over and die. You know, they will not grow up healthy. They'll grow up warped if they heard those words. I mean, it really is a craziness. So, I mean, that was... it didn't get a good release, I must say that. But where it did play, when it found its audience, it never made money. But it's still dribbling and drabbing little
It will make
coin
money
into
eventually, I'm
yeah,
sure.
I doubt it.
One of the critics has referred to your work as inventive dementia.
I never heard that. Who said that?
I found it, but I don't remember.
Bring that guy to
who.
dinner.
Is it likely
Inventive dementia. I like that.
Do you work with a very tight script? I mean, do you improvise at all?
No, I have what we call inventive dementia that I work with. No, well, in some cases, when you have players, what I call players, comedians, I call comedy actors, people who can mold and improvise. We do improvise. Now it's The Jerk, which is a wild and crazy movie, was very well scripted, very well scripted. I mean, each word was in there and had to be said. However, Steve and I, we had a motorhome to take us to work, and this was interesting because we got up very early, sometimes 6:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. We'd take a motorhome, you could sleep on the way out to a location, but they were very bumpy, and we were terribly draggy to go out an hour and a half, one of those. So very early in the picture, we got just a station wagon to pick me up first and then pick Steve up. And on the way to the location, almost every day, we'd go over what we were going to do that day and start noodling with what we had. And we at least came up with at least one or two attitudes, jokes, pieces of business that were not in the script. Once we get on the set, it was pretty rigid, fairly rigid, except Steve, you know, is somebody who might come up with something. And we did a thing in looping on this picture, voice-over looping. Incredible. He created something that wasn't in the picture while we're doing the final editing of a picture. So there is a room for that when you have creative people. George Segal was very creative in Where's Popper, in attitudes and ways of performing. And if you're comedy oriented, you're aware that that could happen, and you're looking for it all the time, waiting to bust open things that are okay. But if you play with them a little, they may grow and become something other than what they were.
I'm told that sometimes when a distributing company is sneaking a film, they take a tape recorder to the preview and they actually tape the reactions of the audience along with the soundtrack, and then they can play it back and know when things were funny and when things didn't seem funny. Is that true?
Yeah, that was our own idea. I did it this time. We had a very small audience, about 40 people who don't know anything about show business. They come from, you know, all walks of life, and and the only reason I taped it is that Steve Martin couldn't be for that first little audience reaction thing, and I sent it to him in New York, and he played it on his tape, and he heard where the laughs are, because then he would know when I say, I think I'm going to cut from here to here and take this little piece out and move this to there. He'd know what I was talking about.
All right, supposing you got this tape, and there comes what Carl Reiner thinks is a really funny line, and there's just the funny line and no laughter on the tape.
Oh, if it tickles me, I'll leave it in no matter what, because that's why we're in show business, to tickle an audience, mainly. We want to entertain, but if there's something that really is funny and they don't get it, or we think it's funny, we leave it in.
We do wish you good luck with The Jerk, and thank you for doing the interview.
We don't shake hands. What I do is I tweak mustache.
Carl Reiner, a very funny man. I'm Nick Salerno. Join me next time for another fine film on Cinema Classics The Goldwyn Touch.